Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Forza Horizon 3 speed setup, or predominantly a speed setup, but in the case of this car, kind of a control setup as well for the handling. This is a requested build for the Lancia Stratos. This is not the rally Lancia Stratos, it's just the standard straight up Stratos HF Stradale. Now, as far as this car goes, it's kind of notorious as far as handling. It's known for being tricky, successful, but tricky nonetheless. And it's not necessarily the most beginner-friendly of cars. That still applies, even with all of the upgrades. Now, we'll get more into that in a second, but you've got a couple of ways that you can go about tuning a car like this. Now, I'd recommend, as you can see, the 4.5 litre V8 conversion. If memory serves, I think that's a Ferrari 458 motor. As far as the drivetrain, I would recommend all-wheel drive. That is a big help on a car like this, where you have that loose front end. Aspiration, I would recommend the twin turbo. You can fit the front and rear wings if you want to. I'll leave that down to you, because you will sacrifice some speed, but in the case of a car like this, it really does help the handling. So it depends how much speed you want. Now, as far as the rest, obviously fit everything that has racing in the title: tyres, power, lower the weight, all that kind of stuff. I don't believe I've fitted the roll cage on this particular car. No, I haven't. You can if you want to, again for handling, but purely for straight line speed, which is the primary purpose of this build, it's not as necessary. Now, as I mentioned, you've got a couple of ways of going about this. You can go the way that I've gone, which is kind of more of a fun factor with the speed, or if you're more focused on total control of the car, which to me is less fun, but understandable because it is quicker, then you could try some different things, but we'll get more into that in a second. As far as the benchmark goes, 2.8 to 60 is pretty good, 5.9-ish to 100 is also pretty good. Top speed of 247 is not bad at all, especially for its power. As far as the gearbox, I would recommend a final drive of 3.3, then individual gears of 2.89, 2, 1.51, 1.21, 1 and 0.83. And then this is where the changes can come into effect, because I've gone for very similar settings to what I would usually do. Neutral camber, neutral toe, 4 degrees of caster, all that kind of stuff. But for a car like this, that doesn't bring it under total control. It's a very old car, it has relatively primitive technology by today's standards, and at the end of the day, it was not designed to be hitting 247 miles per hour. So at those speeds, it is inclined to lifting a wheel off of the road. It doesn't do a full-on wheelie, but it does lift a wheel, especially if you try to turn at that speed. So if that's going to be an issue, then you may want to give it a little bit of camber. And as far as anti-roll goes, you could increase that. I've got it on, as you can see, 10 front and rear. But again, that will help if you take it a little bit higher. Springs we've got on the lowest settings, basically 30 and 35. You could stiffen those up, that'll also help a little bit, maybe up to 40 and 45 respectively, or even higher. Ride height I've got as high as possible. That's not necessarily advised. It doesn't exactly help with high speed lift. I mainly did it for the looks of the car, but by all means, if you want to slam it, it does help. You could also go for kind of the snowplow look, where you lower the front end and have the back high. That can help a little bit, but it won't necessarily be as conducive for top-end acceleration, because in effect you're turning the whole car into an air brake. Now, as far as the dampers, we've got those as low as possible, front and rear, as far as bump and rebound. Again, if you want it to be more controlled, less wallowy, which I personally find to be fun, because I never plan to race this car seriously, but if you do, you will want to increase those. You can increase them maybe up to maybe 3 on the front and 5 on the back, for instance, somewhere around there. As far as aero, as I said, it's down to you. If you want to have it, it will definitely help, but at the same time, of course, you will sacrifice some top-end speed. If you are going to fit the wings, by the way, you might as well go all out. So if you fit them, give it the full downforce. Go all or nothing. As far as differential, as you can see, I've gone for basically the settings that I would usually have. 100% on acceleration, 0 on decel, but with a car like this, I would definitely recommend playing around. That works for me, but it may not work for everyone. In fact, it definitely won't work for everyone, because people have different driving styles. So by all means, try it on all 0, all 100, 50 here, 50 there, play around. Or if you already know what works better for you, by all means go for that. Now, as far as the centre balance, this has huge importance for a car like this, which is twitchier at high speed, because I've got it on 75, as you can see, which again is similar to what I would usually do. But if you want to give it more high speed control, then put more of that power to the front, say 50-50, or if you're feeling adventurous, you could even go more to the front. I've actually done that with a couple of vehicles, and one of the advantages of that is that in effect you kind of turn the car into a front-wheel drive handling vehicle, which means that instead of the wheels pushing the car along, which is essentially what a rear-wheel drive car feels like, with a front-wheel, or what a rear-wheel drive car feels like I should say, with a front-wheel drive car it feels like the wheels are pulling the car along, because that is what's happening. So if you take that split more towards the front, then that effect will be increased the further you go to the left. Now if you go 100% to the left, the handling will become extremely heavy, but you'll have much better high-speed control. It's like pulling a trolley behind you instead of pushing it in front of you. You have much more control because it will follow exactly what you're doing. That's the kind of thing that comes into play. So it's down to you. This one I believe is on my storefront, so if you check out the keywords down below you can find it, or, and I would recommend this, if you want to make some changes, then of course run through some of the things that I've mentioned, play around. It's definitely a car which can be set up differently for different people. So all that remains now is of course to take it out on the road to see, well, what it's like. Now make no mistake, this car does have crazy handling, but as I said, this is not a car which I ever plan to race. So when I pull this vehicle out, it's purely for fun. That being said, some people may want to actually legitimately race this thing, and if so, you'll definitely want to try some of the other settings that I mentioned, especially lowering that ride height, increasing the camber, and maybe, as I said, increasing more of that bias toward the front end rather than the back. That will help a lot, but of course it will make the handling more inclined to understeer and, by definition, to torque steer. Overall though, it's down to you. It's certainly a lot of fun to drive. Top end wise, it does struggle. It's one of those cars which doesn't necessarily hit the benchmark. You can get it up around 230 quite nicely. 247 though, well, that's quite a way off. If you do change up the settings, make it more like a front-wheel drive car, then I think you'd have a better chance of hitting that speed. So it depends if you want fun or efficiency. Either way, I hope you have a lot of fun with it, and there are plenty more to check out on the channel. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.